Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I just wanted to get on here and talk to you guys about this book. I got this book as a gift from one of my friends for Christmas, and I just started reading it this week. I'd say about halfway through the book. I am loving this. I probably won't do a review on this. I might briefly talk about, some interesting facts about her story that I've read once I'm finished. But I just wanted to talk to you about, some pretty disturbing facts that I have learned while reading about the Black Dahlia. So, if you don't know about who the Black Dahlia is, this is about a true story about a woman. Her name was Elizabeth Short. She was known by Beth, ironically, and she was brutally murdered in the 1940s. And this is what she looked like. She had jet black curly hair that reminded people of a flower. So that's how she got her nickname, the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth was a child of 5, and her father had abandoned them when she was very young and moved out to California. After several years, he had reached out to their mother wanting his family back, and Elizabeth's mom was like, no, you're pretty much dead to me. But Elizabeth always had this dream of being a movie star. So she decided to go and live with her dad out in Hollywood. Her stay wasn't very long because her father was an alcoholic. He didn't necessarily agree with her choice in men. She would go out with several men and party and just live life like most Hollywood, most women who go to Hollywood for fame. She didn't have any other family out there, and she wanted to find a husband. She wanted to have a family and settle down, in addition to becoming famous. So, some interesting facts about Elizabeth. She knew Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn was also a part of the community there, and they met before Marilyn became famous. And after her murder, Marilyn was she kind of knew what was going on, and she became scared of the places where her and Elizabeth had met and hung out. So Marilyn never went back to those places again because she knew what had happened to her. When Elizabeth died, the news reporters called her mother and lied to her mother and said that Beth had won a beauty pageant in order to pump information from her mother, in which they got an address, a letter that was mailed to Elizabeth's mother prior to her death. And once they felt like they had all the information they could get out of her mom, that's when they told her the horrific truth about her death. Then flew her and her sister out to identify her body. Her sister actually could not identify her by looking at her face. She was slashed from ear to ear with a knife. She had been beaten with a metal object, more than likely a pistol, and her body was cut in half. It was only when they saw a marking on her body that they knew it was actually her. This story, I watched the movie that came out in 2006 starring Scarlett Johansson and Josh Hartnett, And for some reason, that story just fascinated me and stuck with me for the longest time. The dahlia is actually my favorite flower. Here's what it looks like. I have other flowers that I have as decor in my home. I'll show you here. There's one and another, and I have a whole bunch of them in my bedroom. For some reason, this story has impacted me more than most. I am a huge fan of true crime stories, unsolved stories, but for some reason, this girl has just always stuck with me. And after, over 50 years of this case being unsolved and it finally being solved, it speaks volumes about the amount of corruption that was in the police force back then and could still very well be today. But yeah, I just wanted to talk briefly about a book I'm reading that I'm really enjoying so far. I really like this author. His uncle was actually Walt Disney, and he was pretty much, he knew everybody during this time, and he was a teenager. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this book. If you haven't seen the movie, do watch that. I think it's a good movie anyway. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. See you guys. So I lied. That is not all I wanted to say. Some other interesting facts that I have learned about this story, competing newspaper agencies would sneak over into their buildings and spy on each other and steal copies of what was to be released to the public the following day, and they would take them back to their own newspaper agencies and print them first. And an interesting fact that I've learned, back in the 1940s, the newspaper agencies would work in kind of like a cohort with the police. In fact, the actual murderer of Elizabeth reached out to the newspaper agencies instead of the police, because they knew that they actually had the power. They had the means of just dragging this out every day on the headlines. And also, there were over 50 people who claimed to be her murderer. Just crazy people that wanted their 15 minutes of fame, or they were homeless people who just simply wanted to get booked so they would have a place to stay and something to eat. So I thought that was pretty crazy. Also, the very first prime suspect in her murder that was brought in for questioning was a man who had stepped out on his wife and their newborn child, and would see Elizabeth secretly. And for the longest time, he would not admit that they were sleeping together. But eventually the truth did come out. He was not her murderer. He had just cheated on his wife with her. But what had happened to him was a misfortune as well. Cut off there. I received a phone call, and I'm filming this on my phone. But yeah, the guy was let off the hook. He was proven innocent. He had just cheated on his wife with Elizabeth, and his wife had left him. Things got to be too much, and he ended up in an insane asylum and actually committed suicide there. So I thought that was pretty unfortunate. Also, I wanted to point out the full the full autopsy report was not even released to the public. So, for the longest time, no one even knew that Elizabeth had been pregnant at the time of her murder. Yeah, there's just so many interesting things about this story that are coming to light, things that are not in the movie. So, I mean, the movie is just a loose retelling based on the events that occurred, the true events that occurred. But this book outlines every single thing that happened, everything that was kept a secret. And I don't know, I'm just really fascinated by this book. And if any of you are interested in reading about true crime stories, definitely pick this one up. You will not be disappointed.